am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question.
What is a boost worth? With so many different stat boosts in Exceed, this question is nearly impossible to answer in a vacuum. But, like always, we can outline a framework and use examples to get a much better feel for when it's best to use them. Let's start with speed. Imagine your character has a +1 speed boost and plays it at range 3. How does this modify the range 3 mix-up if your opponent immediately strikes? The only difference is that now you win speed ties rather than your opponent. The strike would literally play out as if you struck on your turn. Simple. This is why you'll seldom see a +1 speed boost on a card all by itself. +1 speed boosts will usually be accompanied by +1 power, a movement effect of some kind, or now strike. Speaking of which, +1 speed now strike, or boosting +1 speed and having the turn order returned to you, is actually a significant change to the range 3 mix-up. It makes dive beat assault, making it incontestable aside from an above curve option. It makes spike beat dive, which it otherwise wouldn't have. And it makes sweep beat spike, which again, it otherwise wouldn't have. However, in this case where we don't include above curve options, it has virtually no effect on playing assault. Assault interaction with each of the 4 range 3 attacks doesn't change. This is a good example of what adding speed does to the fast, mid-speed, slow framework. Adding speed can allow mid-speed attacks to outspeed fast attacks while still retaining their ability to crush slows. Adding speed to slow attacks can allow them to beat some of the mid-speed attacks that they would otherwise lose to, while still retaining their ability to trade favorably with the fasts. But adding speed to fast attacks doesn't help them beat slows nor mid-speeds, any more than they could have before. It only helps them beat other fast attacks, like for instance a +1 speed cross beating a grasp. Another thing to keep note of is the speed curve, or in this case, we can call it a speed ceiling. At range 3, any pre-Season 6 character can boost Light for +2 speed and threaten a speed 6 dive. This dive beats every normal, even on defense, because the speed ceiling for range 3 is only speed 5. However, just by moving into range 1, we can expand the speed ceiling up to speed 7 with the added options of cross and grasp. In this case, dive and spike won't even hit, but even if the enemy has an equivalent speed 4 ignore guard attack, suddenly the +2 speed alone isn't enough to protect it from a speed 7 grasp. Even if you don't have the grasp in hand, just making this move could scare an opponent to playing a different, less devastating option. For this reason, moving into range 1 or using an above curve option is often a good answer to an opponent boosting speed. Now, let's take a look at power. So Exceed clearly has a well-defined speed curve, but what about power and guard? I'm here to tell you that yes, there does in fact exist somewhat of a power guard curve as well. To illustrate this, I like to think of power and Exceed like the fractional tick marks of a ruler measuring from 0 to 1 inch. You know how the half-inch tick mark is the biggest, followed by the quarter tick marks, and finally the eighth ones are smallest? Well, Exceed works kind of in the same way. Let me explain. First, we have 0 guard or 0 power. Obviously 0 guard isn't enough to protect against anything, and an attack with 0 power isn't enough to stun anything. Simple. Next we have 8 power at the other end of our measuring stick. 8 power is notoriously just enough to break focus, the most defensive normal in the game. This creates our upper bound, as any more than 8 is effectively just as good as 8 for breaking guard. Then we have the central tick mark, the most common mid-level of defense, 4. 4 is the amount of guard on spike, it's the amount of defense on the spike boost, and it's the amount of defense on the vast majority of safe mid-speed specials. Why? Because 4 defense is designed to perfectly absorb Assault's 4 power, the typical maximum for fast attacks, both melee and ranged. There are countless examples to illustrate this, like all of these. Next, we have the 2 quarter tick marks. I'm sure everyone can agree that the latter one represents the key breakpoint of 6 defense, which is the amount of defense on sweep and the vast majority of sweep-like attacks, specifically to defend against sweep's own 6 power. The former breakpoint, meanwhile, is 2. Now, that seems a little odd. There's virtually no attacks with 2 defense on them. However, 2 defense is still hugely important for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's the amount of defense on an unguarded EX attack. Have you noticed how Grasp and Cross have exactly 3 power, and how the vast majority of fast projectiles have exactly 3 power? That isn't an accident. it's because 3 is just enough power such that EX attacks will still get stunned. In fact, I would argue that every attack in the game with 2 or less power was intentionally designed to be unable to stun EXs. The second reason is that 2 is exactly the amount of armor on focus, and, for sake of completion, block without spending force, but most importantly, focus. There have been several ignore guard attacks intentionally designed with 2 power so that they don't break through focus without help, and 2 power attacks can't win you the game when played against a focus. And finally, we have the last row. Unlike the even-numbered ticks, which are defined by key defensive breakpoints, these odd-numbered ticks are defined primarily by what number they follow. 1 power is an important breakpoint because it's more than 0, and therefore can stun and deal damage. 3 power, the most common amount for fast attacks, is important because it's more than 2 defense. 5 power is an important breakpoint because it's more than the common 4 defense. And 7 power is an important breakpoint because it's more than sweeps and sweep-like 6 defense. Perhaps this one is a step more important than the rest, since focus actually does have 7 defense. And so, we can see where the common bonuses of +1 or +2 power really shine. +1 power allows Assault and other power 4s to break the common 4 defense mid-speeds, and Sweep to beat other 6 defense sweep-likes, but it doesn't help the odd-powered cards as often. +2 power, on the other hand, allows the power 3s to break the common 4 defense mid-speeds, removes sweep-likes as an option for attacks with 5 power, and notoriously allows Sweep to hit that unstoppable 8 power benchmark, breaking focus. Across Exceed's roster there are, of course, plenty of specials with 3, 5, or 7 defense, and when you come across them you'll find more uses for boosted power than just laid out here. But at least now you have a general understanding of the most common cases in a vacuum, and when you see a fast attack with 5 power, you'll know exactly why that's good. And that's really all I can say. Anything more is just matchup specific, so that'll conclude our final Exceed lesson. Finally, before I go, could I ask a favor? Not to subscribe and like the video, do those things only if you want to hear more from me about strategy games in the future. No, my request is if you think I did a good job on this series, make it your recommendation to newer players. Exceed is a phenomenal game, and I tried my hardest to make this a worthy 101 course. I'd be honored if my work became an unofficial go-to for getting started. Fingers crossed, and thanks. But that's all for me for now. And as always, I hope it helped, and I will see you next time.